Good morning. Of all, reading my messages, of all the things that I thought people might not like about this rebrand, the one thing that has come up multiple times via certain channels is Trump related. Why is he in everything? I'll come back to this. I'll come back. I'll explain it. Sometimes it just sucks to be online. Good morning. Right. Tweeting post. What do you do on Mastodon? You don't tweet. I'm trying to put things on more platforms more of the time. I'm regretting it after reading some of this. But anyway, here we go. Good morning, everyone. George, Stefan. I know that guy. G'day, Stefan. Stephen's here. Callum, John. I'm back from the cyclone. We have survived the cyclone. The cyclone, I was just chatting to Charlotte. We've forgotten when it was already. It was sometime after I spoke last week. Now, the way I can figure it out is I can go to this video, 7th of March. It was a week ago. It was Friday night. So the cyclone came. Cyclone Alfred came. We were not sure what to expect because I was talking about this. Yeah, would have been talking about it exactly 1 week ago. Stephen says 6 days ago. Well, video for me says when I was filming it just before we hit peak, 7th of March, 9:49, and I know it was just after 10 p.m. on the 7th of March, being 1 week ago by our clock because I'm here on the 14th of March now. So yeah, it was Friday night our time. It was really weird. It is a little bit COVID reminiscent. Like, when COVID first started and everyone was like, holy shit, what's going on? We're not quite sure what to do. And weird things in the supermarkets are selling out. And there's a lot of people not going outdoors. It was a little bit like that. Except that, as we said at the time, it's like at least with this, we know that this cyclone will come and go and it will all happen within the space of a few days. COVID was, well, we all know. But it was kind of strange because it was taking forever. Like, I think originally it was meant to hit on like Thursday, really early Thursday morning or something to that effect. And then they're like, nah, it's going slower. It's slowed down. It's done a loop, literally did a loop. Not vertically, but the other way. And I was reading the Facebook comment somewhere, and someone said it feels like it's being stalked by a turtle. It feels like I'm being stalked by a turtle, which I thought was a reasonable description. So we're just getting like more wind and more rain and everything else. And then eventually, on Friday, I guess, it just started really hammering in wind-wise. I had the weather station going. I set up a little Raspberry Pi, because I'm a nerd, a Raspberry Pi and a spare monitor downstairs, and I had a Grafana dashboard running off Home Assistant on the Pi with data that was flowing into InfluxDB from the weather station, constant charts on the screen, and we're just, I guess, staying indoors for the most part, doing indoorsy stuff, watching the screen. So, anyway, so this storm comes in, and it just felt like a big storm, if I'm honest. Super windy. We got a lot of rain. I think we maxed out at 200 millimeters. I don't know what that is in foreign currencies. Something like that. We got about 200 millimeters in 24 hours. That was our peak. And just looking at we're not, according to my weather station, we're not entirely past the storm period yet because we haven't had 24 hours without rain. We've had 488 millimeters in that period. Now, if millimeters don't make sense or your unit of choice doesn't make sense, if we get about 100 mil in a day, it's like, oh, that's been a lot of rain. So, yeah, 200 mil. So we got out of it without any damage of note, I would say. The one problem we had, I don't know if, I think we actually got most of the rain after the cyclone went through. So I think it was like Saturday night. We're in the bedroom and I'm like, I hear dripping. This doesn't sound good. And then I found it was dripping out of the Sonos speaker in the ceiling. It's like, that's really not good because I don't want electrical things dripping. And it turns out we obviously have a leak somewhere in the roof in our master, and it had managed to sort of go onto the plasterboard on the roof and find the nearest egress point, which is where the speaker was. So yeah, unplug the speaker. Got a little bit of discoloration in the ceiling. It's going to need some plastering. I don't even know if we try and fix the leak in the roof or not. Like how many times are we going to get that much rain? Probably should. We'll see. So anyway, we got out of it with nothing more than a little tiny bit of water damage there. Had one other spot where there was a bit of a leak. Actually, two other spots looking there were a bit of a leak. Both those things are being heavily renovated in the very near future anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. And just lots of branches, like little branches and things down. The main two things that have happened other than what appears to be, for most people, minor damage, is we had a lot of power outage. My parents were without power from Saturday last week until yesterday, which is Thursday. So they went 5 days with no power, which is kind of crazy in a modern place. We dodged that. In fact, we were looking at the maps of power outage, and we were like this, our little suburb here was like an island in the middle of power outages all around us. So we did really well. But the main thing is our beaches have just been absolutely smashed. And look, this isn't unprecedented. We often get the tail end of a cyclone that's further north, and we get big waves, lots of wind, lots of rain, and it washes away a bunch of beach, and they have to rebuild them. But this is going to take a lot of work. So normally we'd literally walk down to the beach, and then there's an escarpment several meters high. You'd walk down, and then there'd be like 20, 30 meters of beach, depending on the tide, before you get to the water. And now the water's just come all the way up to the escarpment. Yesterday when I was down there, that was high tide, admittedly. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of sand pumping because the beaches are the things that define the Gold Coast. Stefan's out walking the dog. Good stuff, mate. Scott's here as well. No, mate, I did not blow away. Yeah. So as we have subsequently discussed, I'm still here. Anyway, we got out of it very lucky. I'm very happy about that. Sponsor this week. You may have heard of them. 1Password. Where's my sponsor bar? 1Password Extended Access Management. Securing every device for every sign-in for every app. We've run these sponsorships recently a little bit differently, and I got sent a lot of talking points, but I kind of feel like I know 1Password pretty well by now. I mentioned last time, everyone said they're sponsoring the Formula One, like not just sponsoring, well, they're sponsoring a Formula One team, but not just any Formula One team. They got Red Bull, which, as Scott well knows as a Formula One fan, is quite the team to put your brand on. And it's kind of blowing my mind that I'm seeing this brand that I've known and loved for so long sitting there on a race car. And I think I'm going to need to go to a Formula One race and talk about cybersecurity if I can get an excuse to do that. I have put that suggestion to them. I had a chat with some folks there this week. I want to actually get to grips a lot more with extended access management as well, because this is the ability to, let me actually get their exact wording, but extending security to every device in the organization, securing every sign-in for every app on every device. And I'm really curious. I think a good way, keep in mind, this is sponsorship when I pay for it. Other than the fact I've got this long-standing relationship where I just love the product. And I know many of the people on here are 1Password users as well, and are hopefully advocating for XAM, Extended Access Management. But I'm interested as well in what use cases would there have been where we've had data breaches from an unsecured device or some other vector which we could have tackled by actually securing every sign-on on every device. Certainly we know things like compromised credentials and nasty apps are the vector by which many of these data breaches happen. So I'm going to have a chat to them about that so we can work it out. We're going to talk about branding in a moment. You might have noticed 1Password is not there on the branding yet. In fact, the reason I emailed them this week is I was like, hey, we're doing this new brand thing. I definitely still want to have 1Password there because it is probably the single best thing you can do after you've realized that you maybe shouldn't be reusing your passwords everywhere. We just got to work out how to incorporate that into the new site. If you have a look at the old site, the one that is still live, that 1Password placement there, I feel goes back about 9 years. And particularly, I don't mind it too much before you search. After you search, the cartoonish sort of results it's got to change. So we'll still have 1Password there, but it's going to be different. So a big thank you to them. Scott's sharing links. Oh yeah, because Scott's an admin on my YouTube. He can share links. Other people can't, which is a shame. Yeah. So good picture. So Scott's got a picture of the Red Bull car here with one password on the side. That's wild, isn't it? It's a little bit like when I went to that President's Cup in Montreal. When was that? End of September. And you go to this like massive event for normal mainstream people, and you just see this brand that you've known so well for so long, and it's everywhere. It's like, wow, that's actually really cool. I don't mind that at all. Speaking of brand, let me start with the fun stuff. Because when I started this live stream today, I was lamenting a message I'd received. Now, here's the everyone's seen this before. Here's the brand. I do have a stash of stickers and so on just here. Much of these will be coming with me on my travels. I might talk about it at the end of this live stream. The stickers are actually the one thing that has caused some ire. Not because of anything to do with the way the stickers look, but because it was Sticker Mule that printed them. Now, I do recall a Sticker Mule related thing now that it has been raised multiple times. Let's just cut straight to the point because I had to go back and Google it. Sticker Mule was very vocally supportive of Trump. You may know Trump as the person who won the election democratically. We all have our opinions about the guy, and I think mine are probably pretty similar to everyone else's. However, that's the way the democracy works. You get to vote in who the most people want. He got in. Sticker Mule was one of many of the different companies that were supportive of the guy. That the one thing I will fault them on that I thought was a bit, well, actually, I would prefer that I think any company doesn't go out and be very, very supportive of one political party at the expense of the other. I would much rather see neutrality. I think that'd be it's very rare to have that happen in Australia. It seems to be more of an American thing. And I think Scott might agree with me. I think it's probably rare to see that happen in the UK and, well, actually, most of the rest of the world. But it happens in America. So they were supportive of him. The thing where I think they definitely went too far, and I remembered this now after a few people got cranky, is from memory, they emailed their entire subscriber base, including me, because I'd bought the old stickers from Sticker Mule. And they'd emailed everyone after that assassination attempt on Trump and had a very sort of supportive message of him. And it just seemed like, I think I had more of an issue of it because it was very much in the spam category. It's like, I don't need to get your messaging about politics, which it ultimately was. Like, go and be political if you want. That's fine. You sell Trump stickers. I don't care. But that felt a little bit too far, but not far enough not to use the brand. In fact, I'd forgotten all about it until people raised it on Mastodon and Blue Sky. Now, I've lamented this a few times before where we're now ending up in this bizarre time where even things like the social media platforms are very strongly aligned to one side or the other. Because obviously a lot of people on Twitter and then X got cranky because Elon, and then they went to Blue Sky and they went to Mastodon. And now I go and I read all of these platforms and I see really strongly held opposing opinions on both, often about the same topic. Trump's smashing it. Look how much good stuff he's doing. Trump's the worst president ever. Look how much bad stuff he's doing. I think for the most part, I'm sitting back eating the popcorn on this. But I'll just read this thread because it's on the public timeline. You know, who's this guy? I don't know. So I'm like, hey, here's the stickers. You can go and order them from Sticker Mule. So I took the sticker on Sticker Mule. I put it in a public store, which effectively means anyone can go and buy the same thing. There's no markup on there, so it's whatever we'd pay anyway. This guy says, just so you know, Sticker Mule is a horrible company that is blasting people with I think I got one email. I don't know if it's blasting. Pro-Trump content and texting people to vote for Trump during the election and attacking people online. And it just felt... I know... Well, I was going to say your guy didn't win, but I think this guy is actually Canadian, maybe? So I said it's a bit hard to justify not using a company on the basis of their support for a democratically elected president. You know, and again, this is the thing where it's like, oh, look, I don't like the guy, but if that's what most of you want, well, okay, there we go. But anyway, he's very upset because Trump. not just to placate people, but because it gives people options. I will make the SVG available. You can go and take that. You can go and get that printed at a sticker company that supports your political candidate of choice, or just go and use whoever you like. I don't care. I look, Kamik, India. G'day, welcome. Actually thinking about going to India this year, in the middle of the year. Thinking about it, we'll see. All right, so the brand stuff. Now, what I will say, other than the unexpected Trump connection, is that the feedback for this has been extraordinarily good. 99%, I'd say, positive. And I will talk about a couple of negative things. I think some of them do have some good basis. It's a really hard thing to take something that has been so familiar for so long and try to, it's not just modernize it, but remember the logo, I'm looking at the front page here, the logo on Have I Been Pwned, I made so it would have been November 2013, in a completely different life to today. As a pet project, I thought some friends would use. And I chose that name, Have I Been Pwned, because it was hard to get a name.com, and it's still hard to get a name.com, but even then it was hard. And I thought it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, it was a little bit fun. And then to make the logo, I thought, the SQL injection pattern will be cool. And then to make it classy, I put a box with rounded corners around it. And like that was it. That was the entire branding exercise. And that stuck. And the front page, it just hasn't changed for almost 11 and a half years now. So to try and take that and to A, modernize it because times have changed, but B, make it representative of what Have I Been Pwned is today in such a way that we can use it in a lot of different contexts that were just never even considered back then. Like it feels like you're messing with the secret formula, like how do I evolve this thing without completely screwing it up? Now, in my blog post about this, I put the examples from Fiverr. Now, if you have not read the blog posts, go to Trent.com, look at that most recent blog post now, and look at the ones we got back from Fiverr. That's when I knew we had to get serious. So I had hoped that I could do this myself. And I think a big part of the journey here with Have I Been Pwned in general is me figuring out what are the things that I can either no longer do myself or frankly, I just never did very well. Stefan is here because there's a lot of stuff I can't do and he does better than me anyway. Be honest about it. We got a graphic designer, someone that Charlotte knows from way back, someone in Norway who we spent time with in person with Stefan as well back in December, just working on this brand, trying to figure out how do we keep it recognizable, keep it simple, and let's just say not upset people, but not rock the car. Like just make it so that it feels like a smooth transition. And Michael, the designer, came up with a bunch of different ideas. Stefan, I think I either said to you or maybe said to Charlotte at some point, some of the icons just to me look like a butthole. It's like, Michael was like, so here's this thing and it symbolizes like the spread of data and the arms and everything. It's like, no, mate, that's someone's ass. Like, let's just, let's not get too creative with this. And I think this is what designers have a propensity to do, where they try to read all of this, I guess, innuendo or meaning that if you know what it is, it kind of makes sense. But if you don't, it looks like a butthole. So we iterated over and over again, but one of the samples he gave was that original SQL injection pattern in a stylized fashion. And I kind of went, that has legs because that has the connection to the past. It's recognizable. I think if you make a few tweaks, it'll actually look cool on its own. So this is why we now have this sort of first part of the logo with the 4 different parts representing the apostrophe, semicolon, dash, dash. And we iterated around and around and around just on those 4 little parallelograms. Fancy term there. 4 little parallelograms to try and figure out how to make them look right. Now, one of the criticisms we've had is they've said it looks more like a colon than a semicolon, that bit on the side, because that second character of two parts, as both columns and semicolons tend to have, because both parts look the same, it looks like it's representative of the two dots, whereas a semicolon would have a little backtick under it. And the problem is that every time we did that, it just didn't look good. It just looked, we lost that clean set of parallel lines across those four shapes, which then carries through into the P and then carries through into the N and the D. And you get that nice kind of, it's a little bit, I don't know, I'm picturing like a Blade Runner logo or something in my mind, where it's just that fast, swoopy thing. And as soon as you break that for part of the icon, it just did not look good. Each iteration we did didn't look good. The other thing is you could make the argument that a semicolon, it needs to descend a little bit lower than a column. But if we do that, then you lose the baseline that goes from that character and then every letter of the word pwned after that. So long and the short of it is, this was a bit of a compromise between the function of a literal character representation and the aesthetically pleasing representation of an icon. Now also, the only people who know what those characters are and know what they mean are people like you who are not normal. So you're the elite few who are not the normal everyday folks who are going to know what a SQL injection attack is. And this is one of the things that's changed so much this project, where originally it was people just like you who were following me and were like, hey, Troy's made a thing, this looks cool. And now it's the people who see it on freaking CNN or something like that. And they're like, what's a data breach? So to have something that can start to be a recognizable pattern for the normies without actually knowing what it is and what it means is much more important now than what it was originally. Stefan laughs. He remembers the butthole comment. I was sitting there in that Airbnb and I was like, going round and round on designs. Now, the next thing was just trying to figure out, how do we take, if I hold up the old sticker here, how do we take this big Have I Been Pwned logo and figure out how to represent it in concise forms? And yeah, part of this process was Michael saying, okay, look, just go and find other logos that you like and explain to me what it is you like about them. And I just, inevitably, I picked things that were really big brands that everybody knows. You know, let's say Apple. It's like, I like it because it's simple. Now, if you didn't have all the connotations of who Apple is and you just saw that on its own, you go, it's an apple. It's like, it doesn't look very fancy. I say, yeah, but then the bits come from there, which is kind of cool and it's neat and it stands on its own. The icon stands on its own. Now, this old icon, as I hold it up here, really could not have stood on its own. So you've got 4 or 3 characters, mate. What are you doing? 4 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. I had to think about that. Why's my brain going crazy here? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I said that's why I went wrong. I said the logo was made of 4 parts. It's actually 5 parts because semicolon has 2 parts. Anyway, I spent too much time looking at this. So the point is that you've got an icon alone that can stand on its own. And many of the brands you can think of have that. So think about Nike. You know, like Nike has the swoosh. If you just see the swoosh, you go, bam, that's Nike. But often you see the swoosh with the name. All sorts of different brands, same sort of thing. So I wanted some sort of an icon that could represent on its own. Now, this is exactly what Matthew's just said here. In my opinion, the best logos are those that can scale down to something small and scale up to something large. And this is what we're trying to achieve. Many of the logos that you recognize can be represented in different forms. You know, the icon is one of them. The icon with a very succinct name was another of them. This, Have I Been Pwned, is not a very succinct name. So what is a succinct name? Well, we went with pwned. And we went with pwned, and I guess it's a good time to talk about that whole bit, because one of the pieces of feedback that's come back is like, this was a perfect opportunity to get rid of that stupid word that no one understands. Why didn't you do it? It's like, well, because this service has literally become synonymous with a word. If you look up the history of pwn, in fact, I've got a link somewhere on the website about, you know, what is pwn, and there's a great big sort of, I can't remember the publication, big story about the genesis of the word, and have I been pwned is in there as part of the evolution of that word. And I think that they are so synonymous. And I think that particularly people in our industry, when they see that word pwned, there will be an immediate connection to have I been pwned, even though it meant something on its own before that service. So it's a very recognizable word. For the normies and everyone else out there who had no idea what it is a conversation starter. And the number of times I do interviews, for example, and the host will go, hey, look, this word, like, how do I pronounce it? What does it mean? And you begin a conversation based on my choice of a kind of stupid word, which is good. It's a good thing. So we're well past the point of being able to rename it. So really the only options we're left with if we want to represent it succinctly is either the word pwned or the acronym HIBP. Now, HIBP is the way I refer to it most of the time when I'm writing my blog post, which you'll see there. If we have any formal documentation or contracts and things, very early on you define have I been pwned as HIBP, which is fine. It's short, it's succinct. It just doesn't have quite the impact of pwned like this. It also doesn't look as good on a logo because it's all got to be uppercase. If it's not all uppercase, and I know some logos have acronyms that aren't uppercase, it would just do my head in because it's not right. It should all be capitalized because it's an acronym. So that's why we end up with pwn. And I think just being able to have that icon and that word together is very powerful. And when you look at the mock-ups we've been doing, and we'll talk more about those in just a moment, we've kept that combination, the icon and the word, in the top left the whole time as a link back to home. Now, look, we probably could have just kept the icon, but I think keeping that word pwned on every single screen, stylized right up the top, I think is quite a powerful thing. So that gives us the second variation. So we've got the icon variation and we've got the word pwned, which really just left, we need to be able to represent the entire brand in one go. So you read it and you see the whole thing. And we end up coming up with two variations for that to be used in different ways. Now, one variation has the icon, the word pwned, and then haveibeenpwned.com underneath it. And obviously part of that is, well, the URL is handy to get you to places, but it also allows us to represent the entire name in a way where it doesn't have to be completely massive, which is, and this also goes back to Matthew's point here as well, the fourth variation, which is the one you see on the front of the website, which is the big have I been pwned, but the icon is still next to the word pwned. Now, we felt that that needs to be there on the homepage because for many people, that will be the first time they see that brand and the first time that they see that full name together. And that's much more powerful than just putting it in a URL. So it gives us these four different use cases of how the brand and the name appears. And that will then set the foundation for everything from stickers, 3D printed logos, which now we're going non-stop doing 3D printed logos, T-shirts and hoodies. And we've got some advertising at the local tennis club in order to help support them. Yeah, like all of this sorts of stuff, we've now got these four different options to choose from when we need to represent the brand. And again, look, that the feedback that has been 99% positive, and I'd say that the criticisms have only been constructive. I don't think they've been like, this is terrible, I hate it, but have been a combination of, are you sure you still want the word pwned, and your semicolon looks like a colon. And that's about it. So I think we've actually done pretty well with that. Stefan says also there's a book with the name pwned. Yeah, I wonder who wrote that. Microsoft would have renamed it Credential Monitor Enterprise for Teams. Oh boy. I spent a significant portion of yesterday doing my regional director renewal document thing, and now I've got to spend a significant portion of today doing my MVP renewal. Microsoft does love to formalize things. Soft Tortilla says yes, immediate recognition for all the super users out there. I think you're right. It's the best subset to appeal to. And Wayne's here. G'day, Wayne. So that's the logo itself. Now the website, similar sort of challenge. So how do we how do we take something that's been there and been so recognizable for so long and still make it recognizable, but make it modern? And I guess there are a few different things that I felt would keep it true to its original self. One is you go to the website, there's a great big search box and a button called Pwned. And there have been so many other things that have subsequently emulated that clearly I think I'm on the money with the way I did that originally. So we absolutely wanted that. We needed to have that full Have I Been Pwned brand somewhere up there as well, which we now have. And incidentally, all of this, I'll drop it in the chat, is at preview.haveibeenpwned.com. It is a static HTML only website. I'll come back to that in a moment. So I wanted that. And the other thing I was saying to Michael when he was designing this is I'd like to have a gradient somewhere. I like the blues. I like it being a dark theme. Let's have some gradient. Actually, to take a step back, part of this design process, if you start to think about, if you design a brand related to cybersecurity, what do you have? Padlocks, binary, hoodies, green screen. It's just, a lot of it is imagery to create fear. And you'll see this over and over and over again with companies operating in the InfoSec space. We obviously didn't have that originally. I didn't want to have that again. And I think Charlotte in particular was trying to make the point that this shouldn't be scary. This should be inviting. I try not to sensationalize here. So I liked the blues and the gradients. I wanted to carry that across. Michael's done I think a really nice, I haven't even looked at how we've done this because this has then been built into the website. We'll talk about more in a second with Ingeborg. But there's just a really nice, just soft glow to it. And that soft glow stays in the same spot. I assume there's some CSS involved in there. I told you I had to let go of stuff. I haven't even written a single line of HTML or CSS for this yet. So I really like the way this website is looking. We did decide, I think I mentioned this earlier on. In fact, I remember where I was. I was on the plane about to come back from Europe at the end of December. And I put out a tweet and went, look, we're going to rebuild this website. It was all Bootstrap 3, I think we were on then, and jQuery. Like what should we do today? And there was lots of discussions around Tailwind, for example. We did settle on Bootstrap 5 with CSS and vanilla hand-rolled JavaScript. And the only little thing we've done a little bit differently is to use some Sass in order to compile the CSS and use some variables and a little bit more reusability. So what we get at the end of the day is a Bootstrap 5 with CSS and hand-rolled JavaScript, which I like because it's light and simple, and it is a different era now to what it was in 2013 when we needed polyfills and all sorts of things to be able to handle browsers with different capabilities and different implementations. We do have a lot more unification now of compatibility in browsers. If any of you were around in the IE6 days, think back to how painful that was. Salter T says nearly instant page loads too. So the trick to making it load instantly is it doesn't do anything. It's static. It's probably all just cached at a Cloudflare edge node next door to you, which is what the new one will be too. Now, in fairness, the old one, that front page is pretty much always cached as well. So that should be pretty much instantaneous load. And it might just be things like the icons and so on, which take a little bit longer whilst all those get requested. So anyway, that layout, the static design that Michael did, we're like, yep, okay, this is heading in the right direction. We need someone to turn this into HTML. And there was a very brief discussion where Michael said he had a tool that can generate HTML, and my mind immediately went front page. If you ever created anything with Microsoft Front Page back in the day, you will have permanent scars. And as far as I'm concerned, there are no tools. See if anyone can prove me wrong. There are no tools that can take static imagery and turn it into good HTML and CSS, including from the AI. I bet you there's no AI that can do a good job of that. Scott says Dreamweaver. Could Dreamweaver slice up images though? I was a big Dreamweaver fan. The reason I was in the Adobe data breach is because of Dreamweaver. Because Adobe bought Macromedia, who made Dreamweaver, and as well as Flash. Fun history lesson. So no, I was adamant it wasn't going to be that. So Stefan said he's got a mate, Ingeber, and Ingeber does some HTML. It's a bit disingenuous. He's a good front end developer. So anyway, we took on Ingeber as a contractor to build the front end. And as I said in the blog post, he has done an absolutely awesome job of everything he has done. And if you want to see what I mean by that, go and have a look at his commits. We've got this open source GitHub repository where we're putting all of the static front end in. Have a look at the way he's structured the project, structured the repository, the descriptions in the commits. Everything's got like screen caps and walkthrough. He's just chef kiss, French kiss? No, chef's kiss. He's done a great job of the way he's put all that together. And as a result, where we thought we were just going to get him to effectively build a template, and then Stefan and I would do a lot of the hand rolling of everything else, we've just gone, mate, you've done an epic job. Just do all of the front end, which is what you're now seeing in that public repository. So he's been fantastic. He does this on the side, but geez, I look at, I've got my wall of graphs over there. I've got a little clock for Iceland. So Ingeber is in Iceland along with Stefan. And often I see stuff coming in at like 1 a.m. His time, which I think is late even for Stefan. So yeah, he's just smashing out the work, which is fantastic. So all that's going into a GitHub repository. Yesterday, Stefan set up a Cloudflare page that deploys on merge into main. And hey, Stefan, I'm sure you saw this as well, but when you set up that Cloudflare page, every commit, even into a branch, will still trigger the build, and then Cloudflare will put that build on a temporary URL with the branch name so that when you commit into even a branch, you get to have a preview. So you can have a preview before you merge back into main, and then you see it on the, in this case, preview.haveibeenpwned.com domain. So I was like, that's really cool. And I didn't even look at how it did it, but it's obviously compiling the Sass as well. So that's cool. That's awesome. I love this. So anyway, that's what we're doing now. Now we have in our GitHub repository, so this is, and I'm going to drop this in the chat here as well, so everyone can go and have a look at this if they want to see it. Stefan knows, of course, Stefan knows. Cloudflare does that. Go and have a look at the GitHub repository. We do have some discussions in there, which go back to when I first set that repository up earlier last year. And we've also got some issues in there. I noticed we had a bunch of issues logged last night by someone. Mostly good, but they were also like, hey, did you know you can just enter any domain you want into the search box? It's like, yeah, because it's a static website. It doesn't actually validate anything. It's not submitting anything to the server. So I have been a little bit worried that we might get a flood of stuff which is well-intentioned but possibly missing what it is that it's meant to do, but that doesn't seem too bad. So I closed off a couple of those issues. What else we got in here? Things like remove the right margin on logo, scroll bars on main. So yeah. Other stuff that we'll read in more detail later on. Title bar is not responsive enough. But this is what we really want. So whilst Ingeber is building out this front end, we really want people to go and hammer it. When I say hammer, it's a static website, but load it in different browsers on different clients, check the accessibility side, like all of this sort of stuff. Like just go and give it a workout. And if you find something like this guy has done, take a screen cap, put it in here, whack it in the issues list, and we'll go and have a look at it. It's not to say we're going to do everything, but there'll be a bunch of good feedback. There's an interesting bit of feedback yesterday. Let's see if I can find this. I don't know if it came in. What was it? What channel is this by? Oh, here we go. This was, actually, this is a discussion number 4, which is a discussion I would have started, but this guy is, this is the website visual design. I just found that this was an interesting sort of who moved my cheese thing. Now, if you're not familiar with the term who moved my cheese, it is It is a canonical book about handling change. I remember back in the day at Pfizer when we were going through like yet another acquisition and people were going to get redundancies and things, we all had to read Who Moved My Cheese, which is about, I think there are three rats where their cheese gets moved, i.e., there is a change. And one or two of them handled it well and one of them didn't. And you should be like the rat that, anyway. So this person says, I appreciate the effort of redesigning the website, but after taking a look to it, it kind of made me feel uncomfortable. I have no complaints about its aesthetic, only on its own at all, maybe English second language here, but I feel like the current website design is more sincere, in quotes, meaning it provides enough sincerity, also in quotes, as much to make me feel like HLBP is credible and it is not some sort of typical data harvester website at a glance. Anyway, it goes on, but I was thinking about it later on. I think what it is the guy saying he was very familiar with the old thing and now he's seeing something new that looks fancier and he's uncomfortable. And this is, again, it's like a Who Moved My Cheese thing. I remember also Michael, when he was designing this, I think, Stefan, you were there and he said this as well, because it was when we were when we were sitting there in Oslo, but he was saying, look, for any new logo or new design, you may not always like it at first glance. You have to look at it over and over and over and over again before it sort of sets in and becomes familiar and you become comfortable with it. And I think that's what's happening here. Because this guy sort of said, I got used to seeing HLBP website for years and adored the usability and simplicity of 90s websites in general. So it would be hard to criticize objectively since I'm biased about this. Well, at least he's honest about it. Like, see, I don't mind stuff like that. It's critical and constructive, and it's not just like, I don't like this because Trump. Paul says, I used to run a website. No, actually, we'll go to Matt first. Is the coffee bill higher than the Azure bill? Unfortunately, no. The SQL database stuff we migrated to has really, really hit our Azure bill. Now, obviously, it fluctuates, but as a general rule of thumb, it is single-digit thousands per month now, which is, it's more than I spend on coffee. So even more than I spend on beer. And I think that's just part of it, like the inevitability of it having to grow up. Scott's here, he goes through similar things with Report URI. That there's a point at which the shoestring which you could run things on that worked when it was you doing it for fun is different to the fundamentals that you need when it's now a big service that a lot of people depend on. We rolled to SQL Server from table storage because we simply had no backup strategy. We could not restore at any reasonable time if we had a disaster. Our backup strategy from table storage was every few months I'll run AZ copy and I will dump hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes from table storage into a JSON file. And then if I need to recover from a disaster, I will hopefully be able to AZ copy the other way, but I know it will take at least a week because that's how long it takes to actually dump the data in the first place. That's a very different paradigm to, we have snapshots, I think down to pretty much the nearest minute of a SQL Server database, and we can restore the entire 1.16, apparently according to my charts here, 1.16 terabytes we can restore. I think the last time we did this, it took like 30 minutes. And the last time we did a restore was because I'd accidentally changed a table somewhere that wasn't too serious, but I was like, I'd like to get that back, restore to a new database, grab the data. I would like to be able to do things like query across tables, which we couldn't do with table storage. So that was, all of that was stuff that had to happen as it grew. But we play this dancing game of how do we allow it to keep growing and growing and growing and growing? And as part of that growing, it does generate revenue because we've got API keys and domain searches and things like that. How do we then reinvest that into stickers? We'll reinvest it into things like, Michael is a professional graphic designer. We have to pay him what a professional graphic designer costs, and there's many thousands of dollars that go. Ingeber is a professional developer. Like, we have paid him to do the work that he's done, and there's many thousands of dollars. And that's before we even get into things like insurances and legal in order to write terms and conditions and deal with the occasional issue. Like, it has become not an expensive project to run, but a big project that has had more expenses. So, Matt, I know that's like a long answer to your coffee bill question, but yeah, it's more than coffee now. I think part of the problem is when you have cloud and you can solve problems by adding more cloud, and you're rushing, I don't think rushing is the right word, when you're time constrained and you're struggling to even do the fundamental things you'd really like to. I would have loved to have got this redesign done last year. I don't know. It's very easy just to turn the cloud knob up a little bit and just pay for a little bit more cloud. And we've got to keep trying to rationalize that. Paul says, I used to ruin a website I was helping someone with. Freudian slip by using Dreamweaver versus his raw HTML. Maybe it was ruin a website. Callum, as a blind guy, one of the things I love about HOBP and your blog is the accessibility of both of the screen reader. Thanks for considering this from the start with the rebrand. Makes for a nice change. Well, Callum, as a blind guy, I would really love your feedback on this, mate. You will notice, and I put this in the blog post, that Ingeber, and I didn't prompt him on this either. Like, he did this because he's awesome. He has got some web content accessibility guide checkers in here. He's gone through like contrast checkers and checking for WCAG AA pass, WCAG AAA fail. I'm not quite sure what that is. Someone has left a comment somewhere. I don't know if it was on, let me see if I can find where this is. It was either an issue or a discussion about another accessibility standard that we should be looking at. But you can do stuff that we can't. So, because you've got to try and use services like this. So if you find things that we can use to make this better for folks like yourself, please let us know and drop that there in the discussions. And again, like, this is why we've open sourced all of this. We've put it out there as static pages, because you get very lost in your own world when you're building anything. And I think, to be honest, this was one of my flaws with the Steeler stuff recently, where I got so lost in my own world about what Steeler were and explaining that to the people I thought were going to use it. I really didn't do a good enough job of explaining it to the normies, and I had a barrage of tickets and problems because of that. Now, other things moving forward. I just messaged Stefan this before starting this live stream. So that the trick for us now is we've got to take an ASP.NET MVC project, which is the thing that was there since day one, that has all the server-side interactions and has a bunch of APIs and integration back into the database. And we've now got to start rolling this into it. And I think what we'll probably end up doing is branching it, and obviously, and then going through and starting to integrate that front end, probably deploying it to somewhere only accessible to Stefan and I, because we are starting to integrate server-side stuff that we don't really want to expose in a test capacity. Gradually rolling all of this stuff in. But there's also the question, which is pending, Stefan. We'll probably talk about that here sometime, maybe even while I'm away. We'll see. It's also the question of, should we be doing anything different in the project structure? It's still going to be a Microsoft Stack project. Don't go and tell me to build it in something else. What should we do there? I think we're probably going to end up with a whole bunch of other services and things we need that will move to async, that we might move from the web app into the functions app, for example, to make it serverless. One of the big things that we will do, that I'm going to get Ingeber to mock up shortly, is I want to just get to some sort of unified concept of, air quote this, logging in. So there are multiple different places you can do things at the moment that need you to prove an identity first. So for example, if you want to sign up for the notifications, we've got 5.14 million people being notified when we find them in a data breach. You've got to go into Notify Me, put in your email address, you get an email, you click on the magic link, you go to the website, yes, sweet, now you're opted in. Now that's fine, but then we also use that mechanism to do the same sort of thing. There's Stefan. To do the same thing to check the stealer log exposure. But that's quite confusing, going to notifications to check stealer log. We also need you to prove who you are when you do a domain search. Like we send an email to your address and then you click the link and now you're in here and here's your domain search dashboard. And then we do the same thing for the API key. And what I want to do is roll all of that together so that we will have, whether we call it login or subscription, which doesn't mean paying money. Things like checking your email address in sensitive breaches certainly doesn't mean that. But it will all be in one unified paradigm. So it'll be like, hey, there's a process here where you verify your identity. I'll rephrase it. You verify you control the email address that you've just entered or you have access to it. And then you are quote unquote logged in. And then you'll see, hey, I'm subscribed to notifications here. Here's my steal log exposure. Here's all my domains. Here's my API key. I think we're going to do something around resellers in that space. I think we're going to keep resellers. I think we're going to keep them, but we're going to automate away a lot of the pain stuff. But also even for other organizations that want to buy one of the paid subscriptions, many of them are like, we need a quote. Well, you could just go to the website and print the price list. Yeah, but we would like that price with our name next to it. Okay, fine. I guess Photoshop, I don't know. So anyway, we've got to be able to provide that facility. So we just want to have that in there somewhere. And then I think the other things that we'll be able to start doing with that is we'll be able to start doing stuff like, what if we want to do more visualizations around your data exposure, all of your data exposure, which includes maybe the steal log stuff and includes the sensitive breaches. Well, we could put that on that screen. I think there's a lot of other stuff we can do once we know with a reasonable degree of certainty that you are the person controlling that email address. Now, speaking of doing new stuff, the other thing, I'll just see, I'm sure we have this in here somewhere in Ingeber's example. When I started this service and you went to the Who's Been Pwned link, there were 6 companies there, and that was fine because we only had 6 to fit on that page. We now have 875, which is a lot. Like, it's too much stuff happening in one place. And I'm going to find the page that Ingeber has done here. It's the breach.html. So I'm going to get that. I'm going to just drop that into the path over here on the preview. Oh, geez, copied too much. On the preview website. Right, can I just type it in? /pages /breach.html. I think that's right. Yeah, here we go. I'll drop this in the chat. We want to have a per breach page, just like this one that's demonstrating the color dating data breach. Now, there's a number of reasons for this. We can't just whack every logo on one page anymore. I think we might still have a table, but we might put some controls to like filter and sort and whatever else. But then I want to have one page per breach because it's going to make it, first of all, much easier to deep link to. You can deep link to one on the Who's Been Pwned page, but it's a bit messy. I want to have, I guess, a nicer way of representing the data, but I also want to add more stuff. And I'll give you an example of 2 things I want to add. Number one is if the service supports 2FA, I want to have an icon somewhere which is like, this service supports 2FA. You should go and turn that on. Now, there is a website I think we can pull all this from, which is 2fa.directory. So directory is the TLD. And just as an example, if you go to a page like this, that is the 2FA directory entry for Dropbox. And for Dropbox, it says that it supports 2FA via SMS/calls, via hardware token, and via software token. There's a little exclamation mark here as well, which says hardware 2FA requires also enabling software or SMS 2FA as a backup. So, okay, that's interesting. So apparently they have an API into this, and I think all you need to do is attribute the source, which is totally okay. and then you can integrate this API. I wonder if you can even just call that client side. That would make life really, really easy. Yeah, I have to have a look at that. So yeah, anyway, so then we can do that, which would be cool. The other thing I really want to do is when you look at this color dating breach here, and color dating data breach, we've listed the compromised data. So we already have data classes. Every breach has a collection of data classes, which is effectively metadata. So for color dating, it includes bios, dates of birth, email addresses, geographic locations, names, passwords, and profile photos. Underneath that, Ingeber's added a recommended actions section, which he did himself, which is actually really good. I really like what we're going to meet Ingeber soon in Iceland. I'll talk about travel in a moment. So what I want to do is for every one of the data classes, and I think we've got about 130 of them now, I want to have a recommended action for the data class. Now, things like an exposed password is obvious. Go and change your password, get a password manager. One password has a natural fit there as well. For things like, if it's your date of birth, we've got to think about how to do this, because what is the action if it's your date of birth? Well, you can't change anything. Do you have to be more aware of the risk of impersonation, because date of birth is often used as a form of static knowledge-based authentication? What if it is a government-issued ID? So we don't have a data class called, for example, Social Security number. I know you have those in America. Other countries have numbers too. I'm not going to go and individually list every country with the name of whatever their magic number is. But a government-issued ID, if that's exposed, then that's problematic. And that the action you take might be different. If it's your driver's license number in Australia, you can go and change your driver's license. If it's your social security number in America, I believe that that is a nightmare to change, but that might be one of those cases where things like identity theft monitoring are more relevant. So I want to go through and have these recommended actions. And then a discussion I was having with someone yesterday was, well, how do we get people through to here to read this? So at the moment, we load a big breach, we might send 100,000 email notifications to victims. I feel those emails get very, very wordy. Maybe we need to compress that down a little bit. We'll get Ingeber to design that as well, so it looks cool. And then click here for more information or something to that effect. And you go to this page, and then you can read the whole thing in more detail. I'd love to have more information on it. Like, one of the things he put in his mock-up, which I said, mate, we just can't do at the moment, was a link to their official disclosure statement. Can't do it. We don't have the data, and very often they just never publicly disclose anyway. Possibly a link to more press. At the moment, I put that in the description here. So, yeah, we got to think about what else can we put on here that makes it better for the normies. Right. So again, this is the demographic that I was not expecting when I created this service, that the normies. And if that term sounds odd, it's, first of all, it's not intended to be derogatory, but it is the normal people who do not live in the world that most of us here live in. Okay. Matt says, on mobile, this reads beautifully for what it's worth. Awesome. So I assume that is that color dating app. If we F12 our way into that, F12 is not hacking. Remember that? Who was that governor in the US? He was trying to sue some journalist for F12ing his way in. Yeah, that does look really good. There's a little bit of a layout issue here. Actually, I just went F12 and chose iPhone 14 Pro Max mode, and geographic locations and names in compromised data is very close to each other. So I think there's some padding absent from one of those places. It is a genuinely odd feeling to look at my website and see a CSS issue, which I suspect is a very easy fix, and ask someone else to do it. It's a genuinely weird thing. It's kind of cool. Callum says, trust me, from years of work in the industry, someone who looks into things like accessibility standards without prompting or being forced to is a sign of a great front-end dev. Yeah, and that's the comment on Ingeber. Yeah, he's just done a totally Totally good job. Totally good job. You know what I mean? Callum also says, I don't have enough vision to check things like contrast, but we'll give it a go with different screen readers, platforms, browsers, etc., and let you know of any issues. And I have only a very small understanding of the world Callum lives in as someone who's blind, but my understanding is you do have people with various levels of visibility for which, you know, a lot of these web content accessibility guidelines are things like having sufficient contrast so people with sufficient vision to see a screen, but perhaps not full vision, can make out different shapes and words. But if you're in Callum's situation and you don't have sufficient vision to even see things at a contrast, that probably doesn't matter, I imagine, and you're using a screen reader or some other accessibility tool. And this is why we really need people with diverse needs like that to be able to go through and look at this and tell us what we have to get right. So yeah, thanks again for that, mate. Soft Tortilla, I was told by a marketing guru once that to more easily establish trust, you want someone to see you in 3 different places first. Thankfully, you have tons of visibility. I guess it depends on where you are in the life cycle of whatever it is you're doing in terms of establishing trust. Like if you're just starting out, how do you get people to trust what you're doing? You know, for me, I never expected anyone to trust it, so it was a little bit easier. But then I think enough people had trust in me already back in 2013 that they shared it, and then it gained momentum, and it just gradually rolled to where it is. So now I think it's probably less about establishing trust and more about maintaining trust and maintaining recognition as well. You know, I hope that when we push this out, and my gut feel is I think it's going to be probably a couple of months before we push this whole thing live. My hope is that when we push it live and people see it, they're not suddenly like, is this a website impersonating Have I Been Pwned? We'll see. Marek says, linking to other sites is always problematic when those links go dead. Yeah, and look, I know that there are various breaches in there where we do link to external resources which have since died. And that's a bit of a problem. I just realized that the other thing that we could have here on this breach description is we could have a link through to the domain of the breached service. We do actually store that. So yeah, we could whack that in there as well. We saw it when we have it. We obviously don't have it for something like a stealer log, but everything else we do. Yeah, so that's it. That's pretty much where we're at. We're going to keep on the front end just smashing out interfaces. Ingeborg has done stuff like the terms and conditions, which is, it's not fun. Fortunately, I'll drop this into the chat if people if people really want to look at the terms and conditions. It's not a fun thing, but fortunately the HTML that I originally wrote for this was pretty much semantically correct, and Ingeborg's just taken that, dropped it in. I need to go through and make sure that things like all of the bulleted numbering is still accurate, because if you have terms and conditions and you're looking at, say here, section 8.1.B.2, you know, that needs to be the same as what it was before, because sometimes it's referenced in different places. So getting stuff like that right, he'll keep working through that. I think I'm going to start deferring more to putting issues actually on GitHub rather than the email thread that he and Stefan and I and Charlotte have been having. So you'll see this evolve more publicly. And then on the back end, Stefan and I are going to start getting ready to roll this into the bigger thing as well. And yeah, we'll keep doing that. We've got to figure out when to actually properly launch this brand. I've called it a soft launch, in that you're all seeing it on the blog posts. I'm holding the sticker in my hand, but we haven't actually pushed it out to anything live. It's not on the socials yet. It's obviously not on the website. So we'll start, I think, gradually. I feel like the social stuff I think we'll do when we actually launch the website, but we might start gradually filtering it through into some of our other documentation in advance of then as well. So last thing, I've mentioned travel. 1 week from today, 1 week and 12 hours from today, we'll be getting on the plane back to Europe. Charlotte and I will be in London doing some meetups there. A lot of the time now when we travel, we're using this time to meet, particularly with law enforcement partners, which we're going to be doing in London. We'll then be in Iceland. We do have a public event coming up in Iceland. I'm just trying to get them to give me a URL for that. So if you're in Iceland, come and hang out with Stefan and Charlotte and Ingeborg and I. We're going to catch up with Ingeborg, which would be cool. We will then be in Ireland for a week. We're going to have a little bit of downtime in Ireland and then a couple of nights in Dublin, again, doing some stuff with the government there and catching up with some other folks before heading home to Australia for a day. and then we're going diving with the whale sharks in Western Australia. That's definitely a holiday. So I'm going to do this from home 1 week from now, and then we'll have probably 4 weeks of doing it on the road. Thanks for everyone's input. Keep the feedback coming. Anything you find, please drop it into that GitHub repository, particularly as ideas if they things that need fixing, or join in the discussions that we already have going. Thanks, folks.